We are live. So we're going to share screen. We're going to share screen number 2. Okay, and I'm just getting ready, guys. So if you're tuning in, just hold on 1 second. I'm learning more about the control room. Okay, we got enough of that. We've got 67 projects here. So I'm going to start looking at these. Don't see any sketch fabs. So another moment, guys. Just going to check a few things. It's 12:56 right now, so we got just a few minutes. Okay, looks like I am broadcasting fine to the other stations. I'm going to do a last check. And let's just throw this over here. Do a check on the internet connection here. Speedtest.net. Doing this in another window. And of course I write it wrong. That did not go over well. Speedtest.net. I get this set up so I've got a camera. Talk into that, and then it'd be nice if I was seeing other people. One second, gonna run my speed test real quick, see if I'm gonna run into any problems. And in the meantime, feel free below the lecture, if you're watching this, just give a shout out down here and let me know. I can see Steve is here. Gmog, Ash, Danny. There we go. Okay, download speed is gonna work. Let's check our upload. That's always the problem. Moderate, not as nice. Okay, but that will work. Okay, we got 2 minutes, and then we're gonna jump start. Hey, Avi. That's from David's class. Hey, Alex. Pablo. Hey, Mustafa. A few more seconds. Okay. All right. So, welcome to the very first Crit Friday, one of many. Artists we really grow when we do the work. You'll probably hear me saying that a lot lately, because I've seen it in myself and in my own work. The more work we do, the more we grow. And no matter what our brain throws at us, whether or not it says we've got enough resources or whether or not we're good enough, it doesn't matter. We will continue to grow if we continue to do the work. So you're looking at the screen right now. This is what we're seeing for our very first Crit Friday. If you've got notes, put them down here in the chat. I'm going to throw this off into the other side. I am going to come up here in this window, the one that's projecting, and I'm going to start looking at the course projects, and I'm going to start commenting on those. So again, if you've got notes and if you're responding to questions, put them down here below the video. And if you have any problems getting back to that, remember you're in your course and you're in curriculum, Crit 1 live. It's going to take you right here. Comments are down below. Press the play button. Of course, you probably already heard that. Let me just tell everybody, make sure to press play. Not everybody knows that. Okay, so now I'm going to jump over here to course projects. So I'm going to open this up in a new tab, and I'm going to move this kind of off to the side for me so I can still see your comments. Hey, John. And we're going to talk over here about, hey, Frank. Hey, Steven. All right, cool. Let's just close all of that, and I'm going to refresh. I'm going to refresh, but then I'm going to open all of these. So some people submitted more than one. I'll just talk about one from each person as much as I can actually do that. And we do have a delay, just so you know. This is not 100% real time. It's like about a 30-second delay that happens. So we got to be mindful of that. And let's see if we ended up getting this. Yeah. Of course, and I'm not quite logged in there yet. Okay. All right, and with 67, we'll see if I can get to the to downloading and actually critiquing it. And slight formatting. Okay. Alrighty, so we're looking at these. I'm going to start at the bottom. I'm going to work my way up. And there's a couple of things that we should note about the critique and the way that I kind of like to comment on these things. One of them is there's so much wrong with all of our work that if we were to say to ourselves or to somebody else, Ryan, how do I fix this? That it can at times be this massive insurmountable thing. Sometimes it's a decent question to ask, how do I fix this? But usually I find that's actually kind of a very disenfranchising way to look at things. And instead what I want to do is look at these things and start to explore paths that will get you to righter answers. Not the right answer, but to righter answers. That's a real important distinction in my experience, because the right path has so many connotations to it, and can also lead somebody to the belief that there is a right path or the right path. And you can see this in a lot of aspects of art, positive and good aspects of this. But one of the aspects I don't really like is that if somebody is right, somebody's wrong. And so if I am right, or if there is a right way, then that means that my current way is wrong. That is a massive, massive disenfranchiser for a lot of people, and something I've experienced. So I like to think of this process that we're going to do today, and just the process of art, as exploration. You are getting better. You are going to find the Holy Land, but whether you find the Holy Land or not is largely irrelevant, because you and I are explorers. We're built to explore and to discover new territory. And we're just here to talk about the journey, and things that were cool along the way, and things that maybe I saw that you didn't see. So we're going to start here with Nathan, because it looks like Nathan, well, let's start. I think Nathan, because of the formatting issue, might have been first. And Nathan, give me a shout out. Let me know if you are there. But you, like I said, you'll get this 30 seconds. You'll hear me saying that 30 seconds later. Something else that's kind of interesting to do, this might change, but it's good to list stuff, because it also tells me or somebody else what you're thinking. So we know, if you're focused on the anatomy, all your words are anatomy, then you're going to be wanting a critique on anatomy, or you're maybe missing something else and thinking about anatomy some way that's less helpful than another. So I like people to fill these out because it makes a difference. Some people did, some people don't. All right, so let's talk about what we can do here. What can we do to start to make things better? And I'm going to start noting a few foundation level things that are kind of missing. There's, number one, there's a discrepancy in the hierarchy of form. There's wrinkles here, but the neck is not a really solid structure. In fact, you're getting this kind of bat wing neck. And so that's common. It's because you're learning at different levels and different paces in different places, so to speak. So you focused on the eye, for example. That might be an area where you focused a lot of attention and you've started to really get the anatomy there. But the back is not something that you've been able to focus on, or the anatomy, the neck. I mean, you've got the muscles there, right? I can see the little muscles and the levitator scapulae and all of that. And I can see you're putting the trapezius and the sternocleidomastoid. You're thinking about it, but they're not there in the right place yet. And so that's totally natural, right? You're thinking about the lacrimal bone. You're thinking about the infraorbital, the supraorbital, sorry, the infraorbital. You're thinking about all these different parts of the nose. Some of them are in the right place, some of them are not. But there's one thing that's really helpful, that really helps keep all of these things in check. Because even later on, when you really know all of this stuff, you can still get out of whack pretty fast. So, for example, you could start a drawing where you focus on the nose, and then you start to kind of go down to the mouth and to the chest and all of that, and then suddenly everything is kind of just kind of lengthened naturally. All kinds of drawing problems or sculpting problems can happen when we're focused on details. So what do you guys think is a tool that helps us kind of keep everything in check while we put in all of our anatomy notes? I'm just going to pause for a second, although I'm not going to wait necessarily. But I want you to put in the comments below, what is one tool that can help us kind of keep the neck and the face and all of them at the same level while we are learning all of these little anatomy points? All right, let me show you what I would be thinking about. This brow if I was thinking in terms of hierarchy, you've got a glabella there. And a glabella is pretty high up in the list of things because before the glabella is a brow, right? But before the brow is really the forehead. And what I'm doing is I'm really saying, okay, this is the glabella, but now I'm going to say, what is the bigger form there? Well, it's the brow. And what's the bigger form than the brow? Well, it's the forehead, right? And then what's bigger than the brow or the forehead? Well, it's going to be the face plane. And so you're going to have to be working on this front plane of the face. And then what's the next bigger thing? Well, it's the entire head. And then what's the next bigger thing? Well, you're going to just start to move out. It's the head, neck, and then the shoulder girdle. And so we start to get larger and larger words. This hierarchy, it's like proportions. Proportions tell us, you know, what's the relationship of the arm to the forearm? What's the relationship? There is a hierarchy or a proportion to your focus as well. And so it's really important to kind of keep these structural levels in place. First, you focus on face plane, forehead, brow, glabella. If you get this out of whack, it's totally possible. People do work from the glabella down. I used to have a teacher who passed recently. His name's Oliver Grimley. And he had us copy casts starting with the eye. And we would draw one eye, and then if you're still alive after drawing that one eye, slowly, painstakingly, with lines only, no tone, then you would proceed out from that one eye to all the rest of the body of this bust, and everything was broken up into eye measurements. Fantastic exercise in complete monotony, boredom, and self-loathing. Not a fun time for me, who I'm more of a broke artist. Everything about me is a big movement, and then I'll start to refine, and then I'll start to find, and I enjoy that. I'm fine with it not being pretty. But you can go from glabella all the way down. You just have to have a different emotional energy, much different emotional energy. And you got to be aware of that too, because you may be somebody who likes to do things from a very controlled perspective. And if that is you, maybe you've got to go from glabella to face plane. But in my experience, that's not necessarily a good situation for everybody. So think about it going the other way. Start with your large forms, go to your small forms. That makes a really big difference here. So let's get back to talking about the one thing that would make a difference in the sculpt and would allow it to kind of proceed on the same level. And that is some structural understanding of the shoulder girdle, or let's say a definition of the shoulder girdle. Because what we have here is the trapezius is there. It exists. It has been sculpted. But the trapezius is free of the entire shoulder girdle. There's no shoulder girdle here. That's really the problem. In fact, we have more of a shoulder tent. It's just shooting up. It's like a triangle. So we got the trapezius ahead of the shoulder girdle. What would we do that would create some kind of sense of a shoulder girdle? What's the real simple forms that would create an understanding of that? Well, it's really simple, as all complicated things are. You see that arch? Okay, so that's one line that runs through the body. The Greeks studied this a lot. They were, of course, the ones that developed a lot of our form language 2,000, 5,000, 3,000 years ago. 2,500 years ago, yeah. This line runs from the deltoid past the clavicle, along the trapezius, over to what? There's something really important right here. It's the seventh cervical vertebrae, and then on down. That line you can see from all kinds of positions. It also helps to establish a nice, clean plane for the top of the shoulder girdle. Like that. So you can see it kind of arching upwards, or you could say it's tilting down, and then you get this front plane here where the pectoralis is and the front of the chest is and all of that, and that has its own movements. But in short, what we're talking about is we need to have this line that runs through, and what that does is that helps cap the trapezius. It says, okay, the trapezius is only going to form flesh right in this area. This little triangular piece isn't going to kind of come up. But we still haven't talked about the neck. So where's the neck? What's the form most commonly associated with the neck? You have the sternocleidomastoid, you have the trapezius, you have the levator scapulae, and all of that stuff. But what is the bigger form? Cylinder, perhaps? So we come around to that sixth, we come around to the top, and we need to put a cylinder in there, right? So we get a kind of a flat plane and we get a cylinder. In fact, it's going to be more like that because you need C7. There we go. Having that cylinder indicated also helps us in this side view. So you've got a lot of great anatomical points here, but they are unhinged from their foundation forms. And that unhinging is very hard to correct after the fact. Very hard. So what we're doing here is we start with this simple form, these lines and these volumes, okay? Lines and volumes. These all come before anatomy. You put those lines and volumes in, you throw the anatomy on top of that, and really the anatomy, the sternocleido, it's like 3 strokes of the clay buildup brush. And then you might come in and throw a little bit here to kind of distinguish the heads. And then you might, and then you're going to kind of use an inflate brush or the clay, and you're just going to go right in this area and then push in perhaps. You got very simple things to do if you start with the larger forms first. So that's my suggestion here. Start to look for the large forms and start to look for the non-anatomical forms. And this is where things get really interesting, I think, for us artists, because anatomy is there. It's a word that we can use. But it's just a word. So we know what this is. We know that this is the infraorbital margin, right? But I'm going to say that word. I say that word with authority. It's the infraorbital margin. And you're like, oh, it's the infraorbital margin. It's like, okay, you're traveling around and you walk by this mountain and somebody goes, oh, that's the Himalayas. And you're like, oh, I heard about the Himalayas. That they're this. And now suddenly you have all this knowledge about what that mountain was. But before, maybe it was just like, oh, that's kind of cool. Whatever. You didn't really care about it. It might be authoritative to say infraorbital margin. It's irrelevant. It might be authoritative to say this is the glabella, right? This is an easy way of communicating, and that's really what these words do, and it's really all they do. They help us organize our thoughts and communicate. Your job as an artist is much more difficult than knowing just the words. The words in and of themselves are going to get you so far. Just because you know the words doesn't mean you can sculpt. Surgeons can't sculpt unless they spend the time learning to sculpt. What you are trying to do is take that word glabella, that word supraorbital margin, that word external angle of the frontal bone, that word frontocephenoidal process, that word zygomatic. And then you're going to try to fuse those words, with your understanding, your experience with that form, and create it not exactly like it is in nature. I mean, you can, and that's definitely a worthwhile goal. But what we want to do, especially in our industries, is we want to be able to make this stuff up for creatures and for random characters and for, you know, stuff like that. We want to be able to design. So we need to be able to take these words, understand how these words relate to 3D curvature and all kinds of complexity, and then be able to add infinite variety to it. You know, change the shape, make them flatter, make them smaller so they're not so large or not. And then play with these things from there. There's a lot of work us artists have to do. So the only other thing I'd say on this is you could probably give a little bit, like just a tiny bit more room here, maybe. Also, your nose is quite wide, but I mean, come on, we're in a global world here. You know, comments like that last one, the nose is too wide. You know, I mean, there's 100 variations on the human face now. And it's hard to define what a specific ideal is. So we have to know what your kind of type is, what you're going for. But I would say that you want to be mindful of the bulk that you're getting here in comparison to underneath. But really, there's going to be some variation there. Hard to say. I'd say the only real place that I could start to add some critique is that you have the form for the front of the face, but we're missing what's in this gray area. We're missing some words. That's not quite accurate. And the side of the nose is very complicated. It actually balloons out a little bit because there's muscles that come down through there that kind of flare the nostrils and do things like that. So this is actually going to balloon out a little bit more than you anticipate. So check that out and work this plane. I like to go from the side of the nostril, basically right here, the alar facial juncture, corner of the eye, and then swell that out slightly. Another line that I draw, and these are lines that we all have to learn. So I spent a lot of time on this first one. I'm not necessarily going to spend the same amount of time on everything else, but I wanted to kind of talk about one piece a little bit in depth and start to set the stage for a little bit of what we want to do today. So thanks, Nathan, for submitting this. Okay, so let's talk about Steven. I am going to try to get to the 3D model, Steven, but that might be something that happens later. Because actually, one of the things that we could start to look at right away is the proximity of the side of the eye to the side of the face. Like, there could be more space here. This could be pushed out. This is a very difficult problem to solve, though, because I know the actor that you're working with here, and you're going to be dealing with photo reference, and the photo reference are going to all use different lenses, and in some cases, certain lenses are going to exaggerate this, and certain lenses are not. Depends on if they're kind of using, let's say, 35 millimeter, or if they're using 85, or where they are on it. People's faces can kind of expand in, and plus, what were your settings when you rendered this inside of ZBrush? Because the default renderer, or the default settings in ZBrush, will tend to kind of push these things out a lot and really hone in on, and will basically create a lot of perspective distortion. But I would say you have room to kind of push this out even further. to give it a little bit rounder. But again, the actor that we're talking about here, he does have a very straight up and down frontal sphenoidal process. And that's really the problem that we're dealing with here. So let me set up the usual situation. The usual situation is that there's going to be an offset from the zygomatic to the frontal sphenoidal to the frontal eminence. So this you see in George Bridgman's books a lot. There's this really clear shunk, shunk, la la. But in this particular actor, you see something from the zygomatic to the temporal line up here to the frontal eminence. It's a lot more straight up and down, and you see that in both Asian faces and also Scandinavian faces, where this frontal sphenoidal, instead of being like this green line where it's a bit angled, it's more of the red line, kind of straight up and down. And you can even see it even more extreme than that. And so the angle here can also start to disturb us in terms of how much space is left between the high point and where that that outside of the eye kind of should be. But looking at this from below, I still feel like we could get a little bit more room here, like that zygomatic. The high point of the zygomatic, you should remember, is right before the ear. And now, since it's going to be hard with reference and you don't have the guy directly in front of you, the thing that I would do is create multiple versions. Just real quick, go in, grab this area, move this out. Go in real quick, move this out, and create variations of how far those go. Print them out, put them on the table, and go get a coffee, come back and analyze them with a fresh brain, and you'll see things differently. Super, super important. Get it out of ZBrush. Get it into some other medium. Super, super important. Get away from it. Don't do it right away. You have to change your brain. Your brain, unless you are, highly skilled in transcendental meditation, it's not easy for us to just flip, right? And I can't tell you how many times I have thought something sucked and then walked in the next day and thought, oh, well, that actually was right, or that was correct. Your eye and your feelings are not your judge. They're just friends that are there along the journey. You as the artist need to keep your eye and your feelings in check. They don't know everything, and nobody does. You're going to get there. You have to create a system where you get there. Hope that makes sense, Stephen. That's the biggest issue I see. Otherwise, everything looks really good. I'm a little worried about how this dips down right here, but it's hard to see, so I can't tell if this is really kind of dipping down like that, in which case it would be a little bit on the rough side, because this mouth is going to really push out, and then the zygomatic is gonna come in right there. There's all these muscles, and then he's gonna have some fat. When he's older, it might dip in, but I'm not quite sure he's at that stage. And then also, this is tough, but I think it's gonna kind of work. And this might be too extreme of some pulling out. So just take a look at that. But really, I'm more worried about the width of the face. And I'm worried a little bit about this kind of pushing in. Matt Damon. So Leandro, we're going to cover you right now. And I'm not sure which one you want, Leandro. And there's a bit of an issue here because likenesses, as we just worked with Steve, likenesses are tough. They're just really tough. And so I'm going to come over here. I want to look at this one. Okay, good. I didn't lose anything. Same thing. This could go out more. This could go out more. Look at Leonardo DiCaprio, young and now, and a couple years ago. He's interesting in this way because when he's younger, his face is very thin, but when he's older, he's, his features kind of swim in a lot of flesh, basically. Jack Nicholson, another example. And then in another way, really, I think what's essentially we're talking about is where is the high point of the zygomatic? This doesn't look horribly wrong. The temporal line doesn't look horribly wrong. I'm not saying the jaw looks horribly wrong, but I think that the high point of the zygomatic could be slightly further out, and then that would in turn kind of set us up for a different high point. So this would be skin and muscle and all that, and so then the hair would come in on top of that, and the ear kind of sits off a little bit more. So then that would give us more room for this to kind of round. As it is, if we were to look at this from a from below, that's a pretty steep drop off that is going to happen from the nose to the side, and then choo, I think yours is pretty much straight back. And that's not going to work for the face and for all the brain stuff that's being held back in there. The nose is looking really good. But we get a little bit loose down in here. And so you want to learn a little bit of the words there, and I'll give you one word that really helps. Columnella. I can undo. I think this is how it's written. I haven't wrote it in a long time. But this is going to be a little tiny thing that fits in underneath the nose, and it'll help you understand how the philtrum works. And then also make sure you study nostrils, because if we're looking at a down plane of a nose, they have this really, the nostril is this really interesting way where it kind of curves in. And then the alar cartilage, which is coming from above, this has this really interesting way of kind of curving in as well. And then together they leave this kind of groove that kind of helps integrate into the columella and all of that. So watch the nostrils. Really, the nostrils are this C shape. That's, if you were to take the cartilage out, it's this really cool C shape that kind of spirals in. Alar cartilage is kind of another C shape as well. So you've got these two C shapes that are kind of interacting with each other in this really interesting kind of way. The nose is fascinating with all of that, ins and outs. Yours, it would help to put the clavicle, because then you're going to have a clear sense of, what's his neck like? So it gets a little hard there, and then I cut it off once I've sculpted it. But this is a little worrying to me. Corner of the mouth is fantastic. Love it. Love this. This area could use a little bit of thought. Where's the high point of the zygomatic, right? The zygomatic tends to be very bony into the surface right here. And then this part kind of dips in. And then matches up with the top of the teeth and comes in from there. One of the least understood parts of the human face and least studied is the maxilla. Everybody studies cheeks. Everybody studies a jaw, right? I mean, jaw is so obvious. And then everybody studies the forehead. But then something weird happens with the maxilla. Maxilla is this bone right in here. It's in the middle of the face, and it's covered by the nose, which is already a terribly complicated piece of machinery. But the maxilla is responsible for a massive amount of differences between races and individuals. So if you study the maxilla and you find out where's the high point, where does it pull in and kind of disappear, and then how does it come in and connect to the lacrimal, and how does it connect in to the nasal bones, the cartilage, and all of that. There's a lot of stuff that can happen. Okay. Let's take a look at Vincent. Very cool. Let's see, did you give me any information? Yes. I would say mainly the front torso area is looking better than the rest. The face is all right. These two areas are the ones I spent the most on. You're saying the face and the torso. Forearms, hands need more work. Neck, back, face, and fat. Hoping to add asymmetry. Okay. Just looking this over right now. It's very cool. Okay, a couple of anatomical notes. I'm just going to give some simple things. The external obliques, they actually are going to come up to that rib. So right in this area, we're noticing that basically it's forcing it along the rib cage, and you're only seeing ab, and then it pushes into the rib cage. So one of the things that would really help is to find your eighth rib. Your eighth rib, and look for the eighth rib on other people. Very specifically, the eighth rib. The eighth rib is your landmark. It's the most distant point. You know, if you're looking at it from a, let's say, from a side view, the eighth rib is going to be the most distant point right there. We have the muscles, but the skeleton's getting lost. And that's fine. That happens. So you've got your sternum, all right? Okay. You've got your seventh rib kind of coming in here. You got your sixth rib, right? And now you're going to have to time this. Is the pectoralis really matching up with where I'm putting my sixth rib and my seventh rib? And I would count 1. So the sternum, and then there's 1 right off the top of the sternum, and then the second one is off the bottom of the sternum. 3, 4, 5, 6, coming in, 7, right? And then the eighth rib jumps off that 7, comes down like this, and then the 9th and the 10th kind of disappear underneath that. So this eighth rib is going to push outward, but it also works as a land grab for your external oblique, because your external oblique is going to come up there and start to pull in. Now, one of the ways in which a bodybuilder could get that kind of divot, that kind of crunching in of the form, is if they were kind of keeled over like this. Like, you know how they do that weird thing where they'll kind of, I'm doing a side view here, so they'll put their arms out and kind of really crunch. They really pull their chest down and kind of tuck their butt up, and then they've got their feet up and kind of doing their little pose there. So if they're crunching, if they're pulling in, then of course this is going to create a dent in there. But that's not the pose this guy's in. This guy is in fact in the exact opposite pose. This guy has chest out, head forward, and he's got this bar kind of in the back. So he's got his arms there kind of tied up into that. And as far as I can tell, he's going to have a different energy. So you're going to follow that external oblique slightly differently. It's going to have a different tangent to it. So take a look at that. But it's going to be solved by finding the 8th rib. If you find the 8th rib, then you're going to be able to create your tangent from boom to boom. And the 8th rib is what you're missing right there. This is really cool. Great form. Love that. And really nice abs. So good block-ins. Definitely recommend Ray Bustos' forearm anatomy lectures. He's got this thing he calls 4-on-4 that helps explain the flexors, the extensors, and the ridge muscles. These guys right in here. The face, I want you to take a look at masseters. And I don't want you to look on a bodybuilder. I want you to look on Keira Knightley. Look at her masseter and try to get a 3/4 view. Her masseter does this thing where the form breaks in the front, and so her masseter just really creates this strong plane break, and then it dives back. So look at those masseters, because right now you've got the masseter disappearing and the high point is back here. So let's use a green line. That's really the high point, right? I'd argue that this white line should be the high point. And then it's going to kind of disappear underneath the ear, because that's what has to happen. The ear sticks up above all this stuff. You can feel it in yourself if you run your finger along your jaw right here, just right along here. You'll feel like right about at this point, it starts to dive in because it's diving behind the ear. So something to look at. There is some play between which one of these is the highest one. So it looks great. And I love the smaller eyes and the expressions in the brow here. So good job. Okay, Ashraful. Let's go with this face. Okay, eyes are not right, you say. So I wonder what you think is not right about them. Let's see if you said any more. Eyes are not good. There is a problem. Anybody see problems with the eyes? See, something really weird happens to us. It happens to me, so you guys tell me if I'm the only one. If sometimes I think something is wrong, and I'm like confident it's wrong, like I'm going to stake everything on that's wrong. I need to change it. And then the next day I wake up and I just can't believe why I destroyed that thing that was actually right. It's like I'm remembering it, and my eyes are suddenly saying, and my brain suddenly says, my bad, I screwed up. You were right. I'm not seeing problems with the eyes in the sense of these are bad. I don't have a front view, so it's a little hard to say if there's something wrong there. Maybe you're staring at the front and you're like, oh, it's just cross-eyed. It's not working for me. But this is working all right for me. There is a lot of variation between, what can happen here. Is that necessarily one eye, one eye, one eye? It's not always the case in people. You can see this in actresses and in the people around you. It's just a proportional canon. So the thing that I really like is you've got clean planes. You have your form before your anatomy. So that's really good. This is a really nice line. This is a really nice clean plane here. There could be more swelling there, but I'm not saying that's wrong because some people are a little on the thinner skinned side there. I find it hard to tell with the renderer, but I do see that there is a bump right here. And that bump is going to be in the wrong place. But when I'm looking at it from this view, it looks okay. So it's a little tough for me to determine if there's a bump. The thing to keep in mind is you're going to have the zygomatic, and the high spot of the zygomatic is going to be right along here. Everything else is going to disappear underneath. So you just got to keep that in mind. Don't forget your masseter, like the lesson I was just talking about. But this is really good. You got a boom, boom. And this is kind of a Disney princess, you know, solid structure to it. I like the flatness of that chin. Those are good design decisions. And I'm going to try to find one more note. I think your eyes are fine. But you do need to work on what's in this area. And what's in this area. So I'll leave you with that. Upper inside of the eye, and then the side of the nose. And what you're going to really want to do is try to find how to get this muscle in there and still keep it feminine. Good luck. That's the hard part. How are you guys doing? Give me a shout out. We're early days. Oh, I didn't see if that was the only one that Joaquin was submitting. Yes, it is. Okay. I need more views, Joaquin. But what I would say is this is pretty straight up and down. Also, you're going to want to carve that external angle. And don't forget your high point here, so you're going to pull out this way. And in, and then keep this a circle. That's going to be a robust round tube there. And watch how the glabella, there's a form, the glabella, it's like the nose, it twists inside. That form we were looking at earlier with the nostril, you'll see the glabella is actually a bone that does that. It twists inside and under that brow. So you've got some strong planes there, but I think we're getting a little too simple, or at least everything else is advanced enough where you need to kind of get a little bit more complexity up with that glabella. So glabella, is that really straight up and down? And where's my high point there? That needs to go further out. Okay, this is going to, because it's a Google Hangout, just so you know, this is going to be replayed. Like it'll be live immediately after this. Curtis, just one, okay. You like the overall proportions, don't like the bottom lip into the chin, okay. Yes. Bottom lip into the chin, and that's because of the anatomy. So you have it right here, but you're treating the lower lip as though it is its own kind of tube that sticks out. And what you're missing is that the mouth is basically this this round form, and it has this nodule on one side and this nodule on the other side, and it's got, you know, let's say, it's been a while since I've done this, so bear with me if this sucks. So that's going to be your center line. How do I want to do that? Okay. Okay. So we've got the upper lip, which I think you have totally working. It's down plane. And then you've got a proper up plane. Okay, in the bottom lip, you have a proper up plane. The plane is facing up, but then suddenly the down plane kind of becomes a bit problematic. So in that particular case, your down plane isn't as harmonious or consistent as it really kind of needs to be. So what I do is with the lips, I carve in a marionette line, just like this, and it's just like you see with marionettes. And that's actually the plastic surgeon's term for it, the marionette line. And I'll carve this in underneath like this, and this way it's going underneath that orbicularis oris, because that's the mouth muscle. And then otherwise, it's all very consistent. So this line would go down. Let's see, we do this in green. Yeah. So we would take this line pretty much straight down to the chin, to the little mentalis that we get interrupted there, and there might be this kind of plane break, and then things start to kind of vary from there, and we start to kind of pull the chin out. But the problem I'm seeing is that there's this strong line underneath it, and that there shouldn't be a strong line. It should be a very faint line, if any, and then otherwise that line that you drew should be moved down here, and then just straight planes all the way down. All right, now we want to also look at this area, the frontal cephenoidal process. I'm a little not sold on that. There's this form right here that overlaps it that I'm not sure about. This is a very long neck, possible, but long, so that's up to you. And since he's got kind of a round cheek, he might not have that much neck. So it's almost half a head. And instead, depending on your character, might have less neck to emphasize what the cheeks have. I've seen this form. I know what you're putting in here, though, but it's just something I'm not getting, and it has more to do with the frontal cephenoidal. Jawline, I don't have an underneath. And side. And this slope is pretty strong. I'm missing some brain. Not saying it's not possible, but I'm a little worried. I feel like there should be something more right in there, just right in this area. And this is a pretty far slope, possible, but I really would love for that frontal bone to have more. And also, we're losing a lot of neck in there, so we need to use our structural forms. Even without knowing the anatomy, those structural forms are there. And that's basically the hyoid bone, the Adam's apple, and then this is just a whole bunch of stuff that kind of connects into the bottom of the jaw. That'll really make a difference from the side view. So hope that helps. Curtis Menz. Okay. Okay. Like the overall shape of the muscles, probably needs. I hate sculpting knees. Lots of subtle, interesting things going on, especially in the torso. All right. All right, mans, let's see. I'm just looking, gathering. I think the torso, lots of interesting stuff. You're right. You could do to think about how this external oblique kind of ribbons up a little bit right there, but it's really cool what you've got going on. This could be thought through a little bit. Is it so low? I might take this whole elbow, move it slightly this way so that this was a little bit more along these lines. And then remember that the deltoid insertion is at the halfway point of the humerus. So he's got very developed deltoids. There might be a little bit more happening in here. So I would take a look at that. Tensor fascia latae creates these really weird shape. Very weird. This model Quante Love that taught me that tensor fascia latae is just this thing they don't teach in anatomy books very well. It's this crazy form. It can make a guy look like he's got hips. Okay, so I'm reflowing a couple of things. Sartorius, you've got. I'm going to take this knee, and right now you've got it angling out like that. I'm going to trim that slightly. It's a small trim, but it makes a big difference. That's nice, but let's come out. Dive in a little bit, out. High. This is going to be up a little higher, maybe. So this contour could use a little bit more of attention. Face is really solid. And again, a really long neck. That's exactly half a head. Okay, so from this view, that vastus lateralis can kind of add a lot in there, but then we're going to lose some of that. So I'm kind of carving in a little bit where that rectus femoris is. And then this is going to kind of plateau a bit. Okay. And so we're missing a lot of the soleus and things that are right back in there. And missing a little bit of the soleus. So I understand that it's a subtle thing that you're doing here with the big muscle and the big, large form with the calf. But we lost too much of the Achilles heel. He'd basically snap his foot there right off him. And he lifts that. And then since this foot's quite large, I mean, a little inclined to give it a little bit more. Also, we're missing the tibialis, and the tibialis has a tendon that comes down around to the front. There's little things like that that we can start to explore. So what is the advice for you moving forward? Because reflow is one thing, right? The information I just gave you, it might look fancy, it might not look fancy, but it's a little hard to get an exact direction from this, except for to say, hey, there's a lot of red marks on my on my sculpt. I don't want you to think like that. I was really drawing myself because you're so close in these things that I was really drawing myself to see where the form, how close it was and where it could kind of change. So the things that I would do now is stop doing the torsos for a little bit and just start doing some legs. Do some legs, not hands and arms, but do legs and feet if you can. The leg and the foot is going to teach you a lot about the hand and the arm as well. But legs are they're more understandable than forearms and whatnot. So I would study the leg and the lower leg and really see, you got this form here. This is really well done, I think. It's just right in here, the soleus, that kind of misses it. And how does that soleus attach to the tibia? That's what I really want to see. And then also the tibia. How does that tibial tuberosity come out? And then how does the tibia itself push in? Because, the tibia is this weird thing. If you look at it from a side view, it might be, you might think of it as, oh, it's just this bone. It does this kind of T shape, and then the femur comes out on top of that, and they sit and they do their thing. But, it's pulled out. It's got this little point here, this little wedge here, and then the kneecap goes in there. And this wedge really creates some beautiful complexity to it. And you got to understand knees. Once you've done that, it's all uphill or all downhill from there. And it'll help you when you're older, because then when your knee starts to hurt, you'll be like, oh, I know where that's coming from. Like I used to get intense pain from right here, and they told me, you're sitting on your ass too much, Ryan, which I was, because I'm with a computer artist. We sit on our ass. So the hamstrings get really tight, right? And so they start really pulling on that. And that pull starts to create problems on the bone as the thing tries to rip the bone out of place. And, all kinds of stuff. But anyways, all solved. I don't sit on my butt so much anymore. Now I boss people around, which is also a good thing. So study legs. All of that to say, study legs. Hope that helps. Thanks, man. Let's start up here. Is it Gilliam? Let me know. I see your text in there, so we are good to go. I'm going to pull it over here, and no notes except for over here. Feedback to improve. So it's really good, especially when you want feedback to improve, if you tell somebody what you think is really working, because that way they're not wasting their time and your time telling you what they think needs to be done, and you're not really focused on. So in this particular case, I'm going to just kind of do a quick broad overview, and I want you to be thinking about what's working. So what's working is that you've got strong, specific forms in there. I know that that's the hip, the pubic bone. I got it. You've got a strong cylinder shape for that leg. That's a thigh. I'm with you 100%. William. Thank you. Okay. Now, we've misplaced it in a couple of places, but that's not a problem. That's just part of the process. So, this is the first thing that I think is really kind of good to acknowledge. Strong, solid forms. The problem with being at this stage is that it's hard to know where to go. So we say things like, just help me improve. And, sometimes the critic or the person we're talking to will give us the right feedback or not, and things get kind of complicated because you've got so many things working for you. So I'm going to give you the advice I give my teachers and myself, so that you can basically critique yourself. There are things to look at. Okay, so there are things to critique. And by critique, I mean there are things to say, well, this is in the right place, this is in the wrong place. Okay, so I'm going to put those in green. That insertion of the deltoid is pretty hardcore right there. It is at the halfway point, but it's got the deltoid itself has got a lot of volume. So I think it's got too much, and you probably need to go and think about the 3 heads. And the clavicular head is the dominant shape. The one that comes, not the clavicular, but the, focus, Ryan. My brain just stopped. There's the sternal, the clavicular, and then there is the, help me out, guys. I'm just totally drawing a blank. What's this little spot right here? Very important landmark. Note it, and then you guys will remind me. So that's a really important form there. What's right here? Depending on how big you are, how muscular you are, I'm on the thin side. So when I put my hand right here, I don't feel muscle. I feel bone. That's the head of the humerus. If you're looking at the latest Vogue and you see this kind of highlight right there, that is not this model's buff deltoid. Highly unlikely. That's the model's head of the humerus. The bone coming down here. So that's very thin and pushes out against the muscle. So acromion process, thank you. The acromial portion is really just has a lot of that bulk. So the way I like to think of deltoids is you've got the acromial portion, and then the clavicular portion is really small. It's like that, and it kind of inserts kind of up there. And then the sternal portion kind of is the same, and it kind of attaches a little bit towards the upper part. So you got boom, boom. And it's, again, very weak. Not a lot of movement there, because we don't do that with our arms, right? I mean, what's going to exercise the sacrum, spine of the sacrum's portion? It's going to be when you move your arms back. That's not a position of strength for us. You know, that hurts. So pulling our arms this way, or taking our arm from this upper position and kind of crushing something down, or pulling something up, or in some way kind of lifting this up, that has a lot to do with the acromial section. So this you could look at. You could look at where the tibia is and the gastrocnemius, tibial tuberosity. You could look at where the ulna bone is and how that's affecting the how the ridge muscles are working, and then also how the flexors are. But you know, who couldn't work on the flexors and the extensors of the forearm, right? I mean, that's tough stuff. But there's one thing that you do, and this is, I'm getting back to the advice that I give my instructors, and I give people to be able to start to self-critique. What do you do when you're so far along that the anatomy books don't really help? Or when you're so far along that you can't see what's wrong anymore? And that's where you might be, William. I'm not sure if that's where you're at, but I've been there. I get there I get there frequently, and you want to get there. You want to get to the point where you can't see what's wrong. Because remember, your eye doesn't know everything. Your eye and your brain, you know, when they're talking, they don't know everything. They talk authoritatively. They're like, that's wrong. But there's a lot of people in that room sculpting in your brain. And your eye and that internal voice are only one part of it. So what I do when I get to this point where I just can't see what's wrong is I start to get very explorer orientated, like an explorer who gets lost in the wilderness. They call it orienteering. When you go run out somewhere, you get lost and you find your way back. It's a perfect metaphor for this because we're out in the middle of the wilderness. We're in the middle of this body. We have no idea what the topology is like. We're just in our own head. How do we find our way to reality? Well, what's the first thing an orienteer does? They start to find their landmarks. And then they start to define locations and create names. Even, it doesn't have to be the name. You don't have to say this is the elbow. But what we need to do is start to create names that help us understand form and topology, things like that. So in this particular case, you've got to come in here and you zoom in on this area so that one area now is this major focus of your attention. And you're sitting over here going, how am I going to now start to distinguish that? Let me see if I can kind of draw it in there real quick. So now what we need to do is start dividing up this area and start saying, okay, so what's right in here? Well, right in this little tiny spot, you're probably not even aware of it. And it's one of those things where you just learn it incrementally, but those are epicondyles. There are these epicondyles in there. So there's this like flat surface hanging out in there. It's this flat round surface because of the epicondyle. And then we start to kind of trace these muscles around that because that's what they do. And then they have different contours. So this kind of will come out and then out and then out and out. And then what's happening at that epicondyle? Well, there's a bunch of extensors coming out of that epicondyle because they're attached to it. And the extensors, who's on top, who's on bottom? What are the extensors in there? 1, 2, 3. So let's say maybe one of them is really large and that's on top, right? And so this is a really large one, and then it's going to be a little small one and a little small one that gets in there. So we start to get really detailed about certain areas and look at topology and start to name these things and start to think in terms of who's on top, who's on bottom, what's flat, what's smooth, what's round. You know, what do we know about this anatomy? And then there's the ulna itself, olecranon process. What's that shape? Well, and what's attached to that? What's overlapping that? What's coming up here? So we're going to have the trapezius. You know, there's a lot of things that happen in there. And when we orienteer, we don't look at the entire mountain. We're not looking at the entire mountain saying, hey, I'm over here. No, we look at the 20 feet by 20 feet around us, and we start to analyze that terrain. We start to look 20 by 20, and we just kind of keep our eyes around us and kind of let our gaze kind of expand and pull back and expand and pull back to help us start to get a sense of it. At least that's my thought. So how does that translate into action steps for you? Narrow your focus. Focus on an elbow. Get the elbow right. Focus on a joint, a shoulder. Focus on that area. Focus on the knee. Focus on the ankle, wrist, sternum. Focus on joints and look for words, contours, overlaps, make up words. Words are also landmarks. See if that can help. All right. Hope that helped. Hope you don't mind if I call you William. And don't want to lose track, so I think we're at Christian. Overall expression you like? Does fat really flow that way? And with fat, get some reference. Highly recommend it. And it is its own beast. But in this particular case, let me do this. You're not really going to have it kind of suck in like that, per se. This is really just going to kind of bloat out. And you can see that if you're Googling like fat suits, a lot of it's just kind of chunky. The thing to remember about fat is not fat. One of the things to remember is anchors, glue points. Where's another one? I think. Okay. So these are glue points where your skin is glued to the skeleton. I don't think is one. They're glued to the skeleton. So if somebody is going to give you a facelift, what they do is they saw through all this tendinous tissue there, and then they pull the skin back, press it down, and it re-glues itself. But these are glue points. So that's why you're getting the flesh falling right here and not in this area. And that's because there's a glue point right there that holds all this flesh there and that underneath and right to the jaw. So there's glue holding skin there, but skin is piling up over the top of that, creating the jowls. Same with the eye. There's a glue point there, and then the fat's just gathering up over the top of that, and then just eventually sags down. Eventually just gives in. The skin has lost its elasticity. It's ready to go. You're going to get more of a continuity here. Like this is just a big tire shape coming around. And then the jaw. So this is going to flow a bit differently. And in multiple stages. And I think you definitely look for John Candy, and Googling fat suits will help provide a lot of reference. Not sure about this line right in here. And there's a lot of detail in that nose and face, which is actually not that bad. So I think we're in really solid lines. You've got good structural elements here. Look for creating this a little bit on the simpler side and just a tube that wraps all the way around. Look for your anchor points. Make sure you've got those indicated, and make sure you understand that concept, because that really helps us sculpt fat kind of flowing over this form. It really explains a lot about eye bags, especially how eye bags will sometimes get really thin at the sides. They just start to kind of droop down in this weird way, and you're like, why is it doing that? It's because it's literally hanging from that glue point. Cool. All right. Thanks, Christian. And allies could change the lips and change muscle study. Overall, the features are coming out. Yeah, I think overall the features are really coming out. The chin's quite large. It's possible, but it is quite large. So I would try some variations there. I like the columella. I like the fact that the upper lip is it's overlapping the lower lip, and it's a very classical lower lip. And this lower lip will help explain, I think, a lot of that marionette line that I was talking about earlier. This area is not studied, so that has to be understood. And that's the maxilla I was talking about that we just don't really fully understand a lot of times. So really get in there and start to understand that. And then and that's it. Frontal. Yeah. So check your chin And then really double down on the maxilla and really see if you know where that infraorbital line is. And where is the high point of the zygomatic? And how is that zygomatic shaped? Because right now, this is a really big zygomatic. But if you look at, say, Al Pacino, you'll see like it'll come up and then there's some other forms in there. So there's a little bit more complexity to consider. Also, this is a common issue that happens. We start to kind of add this depth in there. There could be this extra volume right here, but in this side of the face, this is frontal bone. So we want that to be kind of as clean and clear as we can. And so I would try to straighten out that plane that you have, that form, so I would straighten that out. Especially see it right here. Cool. Hugo. How you guys doing? I know I just asked. Hugo looks really cool. I'm a little worried about that head, but this is so far developed, and I'm assuming you've got a reason kind of for that. So I'm not going to note that, but it's just, I got to note it because it's getting me. Okay. Other than that, let's talk about, this is another case where you're so far along in this sculpt that you need to start to look for ways to critique this work yourself. How do we kind of move this forward? The idea of anchors will make a big difference for you because those affect emotions like this, blowing things out and things of that nature. This is really cool. You've got some, yeah, let's see. This line here, this area I just feel like needs to be thought about a little more or looked at. And it's hard to tell here. I seem to see a jump in this. Facet, tip defining point. Yeah, let's do this. I don't have clear guidelines on the notes that you would want. So I would say take a look at the plane break of the nose. Take a look at this line I'm not quite happy with, and I feel like this volume right here is off a little bit. And I would love, especially in my sculpt, to just have a little bit more focus on that external angle of the frontal bone as it goes down into the frontal sphenoidal process. There, that's better. But otherwise, we look pretty cool. Thanks, Hugo. Okay, so we want to talk anatomy, and did we do anything right? And did we do anything wrong? All right, this is a great start on our anatomy. Let me know if you guys have any problems hearing me. I just turned the fan on. And it looks like you've got all the muscles kind of in the right place, but what we need to see is the skeleton. 90%, not 90, but a good chunk of our face is the skull. Because these guys just sit on top. Like this is actually thinner than you've got in here. And thinner. And then that nodule needs to be part of the orbicularis oris. Yeah. So I would say the mouth is the biggest thing that we need to kind of shape. Make sure that the orbicularis oris has a presence, because the orbicularis oris is actually 4 muscles. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, and they're just attached to this nodule and to each other. So you got to make sure you put them in there. And I need to see the skull. Otherwise, we look like we're in fine shape, but it would be wise to also do the alar cartilage and the nostril as their own forms, so you can kind of track how they interact. And this is too strong of an angle. So inside of the eye, something a little closer to that. This little guy right here is going to sneak in underneath the nostril. Yeah, that's going to be too much. And this is too much volume. So this guy's going to flatten as well. And what I would do is use H polish or use clay buildup. You set brush mod to, I don't know, 3. And then you use Alt and you kind of push in. So let's talk a little bit about this. Let's give a little bit clearer steps here. I would say where it is green, you're going to kind of push those in. You're going to redo that line because this is going to be much thinner than that. And make sure you pull out that mouth, that nodule, pull that above these guys. These guys attach at the corner. You need that nodule to be very distinct. And then I think we would be good to go. We'd need to see the skull and watch that line. Cool. Thanks. Oh, I opened it. William, you were wanting notes on the face? I am running short on time, so I'll give you one note. The lips are very wide. But the forms are so intact that I'm hesitant to comment, because if this was more sci-fi, you know, there's a lot of variables in play here. And I think the eyelids are really good. Nostrils, your infraorbital is fine. Your forms are fine. Yeah, not too many notes on that, except for I'm a little. Depends on if you're going for realism. Those are some seriously large lips. But if not, then it works. Okay, what have we got? A lot. So now I'm going to speed this up now, guys, and this is not an uncommon thing, because we're doing this. This is a chance for me to get to see your work and for you to get some fresh eyes on stuff. And so now what I need to do is just get everybody, as many people as I can, some fresh eyes before we have to go, because we're now at an hour and a half. But it's also really important for you to watch the feedback that other people get, because that is going to make it makes a huge difference in your own work as well. So let's go in here, and I'm going to just start talking and writing fast. Left me some notes. Michael. All right, Michael. I'm talking to Michael, right? I saw two people's names there. Michael. First, great work. Awesome. Really have a sense of dynamic placement of forms. So the fact that this is pushed out and strong cheeks and strong chin and you've got a strong face plane and all of that stuff is really working quite well. Really well. And then the hair, so the hair shows that you're dealing with overlaps, right? And you have a strong sense of that. And I get the sense of some really solid classical training, or these days, classical learning, not necessarily training. Okay, but we have one big problem, and that's the maxilla. And this nose, side plane of this nose. Where is that? Let me see if I have a lower 3/4. Okay. So where's the side plane? How does this match into there? A little bit of bulge from the muscle. Where's that supraorbital margin? That's the only thing, because this volume looks kind of nice here, but then why do we have this line right there? Because really this should be the infraorbital margin, or the zygomatic kind of pulling in. So we just need a straighter plane or something rounder in that area. Otherwise, fantastic lips, great volume, an amazing sense of drama and overlap. Just study that zygomatic, or that maxilla. Banya. Let me see, was there any more from Banya? Or, okay. Landmarks. You want the texture more? Improve eyelids and skin. Okay, you want to improve eyelids and skin. But I think there are other lessons to be learned here. I'm going to point out a few places. It's like that nostril just disappears. Your nostril doesn't have as clear of a line, clear of an edge. This guy looks pretty hardcore. That doesn't mean that, he's had drug use and all of that stuff, but I can tell you, cocaine use can do some strange thing to your nostrils. And that's something to kind of consider what's happening right in here, as it goes a little bit on the Michael Jackson side. And then what's this? There's this crazy form there. I don't know what it is. So he's got his zygomatic, and then this is the foramen of the zygomatic, and then there's this weird thing that happens. And something else is right in here, and then there's this dipping in a form. And then also, is yours coming out like that? Because I feel like this is very flat, and it's just like a little dimple right in there. And you've got a bit stronger, but there's more curvature you could kind of follow and start to play with in this area before you get to kind of skin. And follow that zygomatic as it kind of dwindles, right? It's dwindling, and then what's happening? That you're getting that infraorbital margin kind of showing up, which you've done so well in the corner here. Just an amazing job. But we could start to look at that. So here we got. Where's your infraorbital? So you're really missing that infraorbital and how that zygomatic kind of dwindles in size right there. And then this lower lid is just barely there. I mean, this guy has very little fat on him. Very little. Beautiful inside of the eye. That could probably be pushed further as you start to, say, expand what's there. And then there's this is me in Explorer mode. This is a little triangle shape in there. I don't know what that is, but that's cool because I'm in Explorer mode. And then there's this like little rectangle. I'm going to say it's a rectangle. Is it a rectangle? You know what? I'm the explorer here, so I'm by myself. I'll decide what it is. This little triangle. What is that? And then there's this little divot. And then it pops out. So I start doing contours on this guy, and I start looking. I'm like, oh, there's a little divot right there. What the hell is that? And then there's this, oh, that's that muscle that's coming out. Oh, wait, that's way out here. Right? And now these guys are all wrong, and then I got some stuff, and then there's this really interesting thing. The form is diving in right in there, and what is that? Oh, what do you know? That's the lateral bone. All right, and then this is the nasal bone. And then this is the alar, which we know. And then this is the nostril, which we know. And then look at this nodule at the side of the mouth. Look at how, like, it's overlapping the lip. And that you can really see it on this. It's overlapping the lip itself. And this is going to give you a whole nother level of understanding of this character. Like, this character's face is literally expressing his emotion. It's tired. It's just collapsing in on itself in there. And that lower lip, that lip gets kind of swallowed up underneath this swell of flesh. It's poetic. It's crazy poetic. Really great job. For me to be able to come in here and start to look at these things and talk about these things means that you've got everything in place for it. Look at this. There's this round, and then there's this guy. You've kind of got it set up here. But then there's this round, or is that round? What is that? And so now we get in there and we start exploring. Yeah. And so we start to do some drawings like this to help us understand it. And then we get this little triangle shape. And so now you've got to integrate that as well. How's that jaw connecting? How's his flesh connecting into that jaw? What's happening? How can I get a sense of this kind of interactive and basically overlapping and growing down and then on from there? I took a little extra time there because I think this is lessons for a lot of people, all of us. So very cool. Thanks, Banya. Antonio. Why did I do that? Anatomy, balanced, lack of detail, problem with proportions, poor and incomplete figure anatomy. Don't be so hard on yourself. Why is my pop-up mode? Okay, there we go. Okay, so you have the shape of the face perfect. This is great. Absolutely. You've got the eyes, the brow set up. Awesome. Okay, and then now we've got the nose a little bit on the low side. So pull that up, I'm going to tell you, probably right there, and then it's a little hard. Here's a guide. Wherever the bottom of that cheek is going to be, that's going to be the bottom of the nose for the most part. There's all kinds of guides, but do this. Just look for the bottom of somebody's cheek and try to follow if that's where the nose is. Okay, and then we're going to kind of move that mouth up a little bit. So I hope you get a screen grab of this, because this is what I would start to kind of do. Just moving these things up. You're not far at all. Very small movement changes. Okay. Don't forget form. Don't forget these lines. These are really important, these lines I just drew. Orbit, zygomatic, masseter, jaw. 1, 2, 3, 4. I draw them all the time. See how that works? And this is really good and cool and clear. So really great job. Work on the structure of the neck. Okay, move those proportions up slightly. And work on another face, several of them, 5 of them, just like this, and try to get it as succinct as you can. Thanks, Antonio. Gerard. Okay, so we've got texture here, makes it a little hard, but it looks really good. Let's see what we want to comment on. I like the volume. I like where this nose is. Lips, great. I'm not going to. That looks good. Could maybe use a little bit more here on the sides. Hard to say. In terms of the shoulders, that's pretty straightforward. Don't forget the acromion process, and don't forget that it drops down. So the clavicle sits on top of the acromion process, drops down, and then the deltoid comes from the acromial process from there. And then the trapezius is going to flow up from that clavicle. So this kind of massive bulk here is not going to work. And then also try to think, get the clavicle to hang from the, or not the clavicle, get the deltoid to hang from the acromion process, and then bulk up a little bit and then insert. So play with that. Play with, instead of just being round, try to make it dunk, dunk, dunk. Find your 8th rib. It's hard to see if you've got it in there, but I don't think you do. I think it's too continuous of a rib cage that you have. You have an idealized rib cage. Put an 8th rib in there. What does it look like? Is the 8th rib farther out than the 7th rib? What is that looking like? And last thing, ridge muscles. Check your bulk there. I'm just not sold entirely. That's quite bulky. And we're probably talking about just a tiny bit. Otherwise, looking super, super sharp. And I like the face. But could use more brain space. John, long time. Mouth, nasal labial fold. Brow ridge feels lost. Lower nose. What's my back of the skull problem? Taking things through to I'm having a hard time talking today. All days, actually. Okay, some back of the skull problems. You don't have any problems, John, with the back of the skull. What you got is just some missing words. That's it. Because the back of your skull looks great for somebody who's younger and for a little bit more idealized block-in. Looks fantastic. Amazing. Just missing some words. So nuchal line, and I'm going to tell you a short story around the nuchal line so that it kind of we remember it. So nuchal line, and then there's an inferior, superior, all of that stuff. But anybody had a child in the last, well, I don't remember when they started testing this, but let's say 5 years, if you had a child, and trust me, it could have been longer than that. I haven't been having children that long. But they would do things where they test the nuchal ligament. And the distance between the nuchal ligament and the spine, I think, is what they test, or the thickness of it. And that's a indicator of Down syndromes, and I think a few other problems, but Down syndrome is the big one. So they'll do that test via ultrasound, and that'll give them their indicator of whether or not they should do an invasive test or not. It's gone nowadays because they can do it via blood, and that's like the last 6 months. Last year, they were able to do it via blood. Year and a half. But before, they used to test the nuchal ligament. So think of your nuchal line. Inferior, superior, nuchal line. And where is the trapezius attaching? The top, the bottom, and then your mastoid process. Go ahead and put your mastoid process in there. That'll start to clarify some things. Okay, you are definitely losing the zygomatic. And remember, we've been looking how the zygomatic gets smaller in there, and you did that. But we don't have a clear line right there, and we don't have a clear sense of how the lower eyelid is clinging to the eyeball, and then it's bridging out to that zygomatic. So that's something you could kind of work on. Also, you really need that external angle of the frontal bone, and this is all a lot of stuff. You're not going to have that much stuff happening right in there. It's going to be much flatter. This is quite low. Is it really that low? Maybe it's a little higher. I don't know. And that's all. Nuchal line, mastoid, side of that frontal stephanoidal process. You should really take a look at that. It's probably whatever wrinkles are there are much softer than you've got. And either way, there's just too much actual form changing. It's like a scar more than it is skin. And then you could really get in and do some of that sculpting in here that we were just looking at with that character, with trying to figure out how these forms, what's in there, and then maybe there's the form in there. What's that nostril like? Clearing that plane. So a lot of that applies here as well. Awesome job, though. Kai. Muscles are better shaped in proportion than after module 2. The intersections, the flow. Okay. There should be more space here, I think. So a chromium process, and then I would move that out a little bit. Give it a touch more room. That's a tiny change in there, but that'll make an effect on your deltoid because it's not going to dip in so much. So that'll improve that. It'll also improve the bicep, which really should look like it's kind of heading towards that clavicle. The abdominal muscles are good. I like this. The same rules apply as earlier. There's a line that crosses here that you want to think about for the trapezius. So give it some volume. Pump it up. This is looking very emaciated. Okay, and straight up and down planes in the back, if you can. And then just have them dive in afterwards. And we need that soleus in there to really help us understand what's happening. So we need some more volume in there. Very cool. And that's some serious butt. So maybe that's coming from the pelvis, which is quite wide in comparison, or deep, I should say. I would look at that and maybe tone that down a bit, more like this. Yeah. And this could use a bit more curves. Yeah, but otherwise great. Those are small changes. And then really with écorché, keep moving forward, get all these muscles in and get that part done and take a break. And then come back and really worry about your position. I find it's best get them in. Okay. Charles, did we cover you, Charles? I saw you talking and I did not cover you. Okay. Charles, awesome. I like the overall likeness is achieved. Overall feel is realistic. Seems good. Hair is weak. We always have to say something negative about ourselves, don't we? It drives me crazy. Okay. I'm a touch worried about the frontal eminence. I don't have a side view, so I'm not sure. But I really like this George Bridgman boom. Strong structure. I really love that. Boom, really clear. You could probably make a distinction between the lid and the zygomatic, and as we saw earlier, make it small and then start to see how this kind of bridges in. But you've really explored this very well, I think. We could get in there and find more, but especially with that last guy, we saw how this nodule can start to erode away that lip. Or in a strong dude like this, not so much. I would try to do this guy without the beard because you're losing that marionette line and what's happening underneath. It's getting obfuscated. So I can't tell what's happening with the depressor anguli and then the mentalis. You could use a little bit more emphasis on a mentalis pushing things out. And so what that does is it'll create tiny, tiny differences there. And the way I can see it's not quite there yet is because in the side view, it's quite, or this 3/4 view, it's quite quite squared. And what we would look for is either that's beard, like my beard, covering things up. But this guy doesn't have a beard like I do. He's got, he's got a couple days growth, a day growth for some of us. Yeah. So we need the mentalis and then a little bit of that triangularis, or I transition between triangularis and depressor anguli, mostly because I like to sound like I know what I'm talking about. Because most of the time I don't. So when I do, it's quite a nice thing. So, but you can call it whatever you want. You can call it that triangle thing. That's why they called it the triangularis. And then they were like, well, that doesn't tell us anything, guys. What does it do? Well, it depresses. So let's call it the depressor, and it depresses at an angle. So let's call it, that's just me making things up at this point. This is really crystal clear. I might like some variation there. What does the jaw do? Look underneath. If I'm looking at it from underneath, we've got the chin. You've got this kind of round form that comes out, and then it bows in for the ramus and the jaw angle of the jaw and all that stuff. So, and then of course this is all filled up with masseter, so that's why you can still get these classical lines. But that's where your good stuff is next, is those little tiny things like what's happening right there, right freaking there, right there. And then what's happening right here, and what's happening right here, and what's happening right there. Otherwise, rock solid, man. Rock star sculpting. Really awesome job. Thanks, Charles. Frank, I'm going to be here until 5. I can't not talk. For the self-portrait, the lips, ears all need work. Okay. This is really great structure. Really nice. I love that. And this is really nice. Great job. Oops, sorry about that. You use these little details like in the nostril. You could have used a little bit more distinction for where that cartilage is flowing. Especially when it's so far along. Great work for that. We lost it here. So I see you're rushing and just letting things kind of stretch, which is fine. So let's talk. Let's find a couple of things that we can note, and then we call it a day on it. Is that right? I'm a little worried about this space, but it kind of creates this really nice angle. But I am a touch worried that it could use a little bit more volume up there. Tiny, and then that's a lot. So, but this is really nice. And then just remember your rule of thirds and your overlaps. So by that I mean how are these different parts interrelating to each other? How can you break this into 3 forms? 1, 2, 3. So one on top, middle, bottom, that kind of undulate in and around each other. Same here. Start to break this up so that one kind of comes around. That wrong curve. And then something kind of pulls out underneath it. How can I weave these guys into? This is really good the way you've got it, but you take it to the next level if you start to really show how something kind of pulls out on top of that. or inside, or we start to undulate it. Same here. So right now this is all the same, but maybe this stuff pushes out and that pulls in, and then suddenly we get this big volume that's going to kind of disappear underneath it like that. And so these guys start to kind of combat each other. That's the next level for that. Real quick on the dude. Strong difference between these guys is in the maxilla. If you start focusing on that maxilla, you'll hit all of these things a little bit harder and a little bit clearer. So, good job. Zaki. Stuck on how to go about forms of the face. All right. You need to get in and start to experiment and start to orienteer. And in this particular case, what I would say is look for the valleys and the hills. I'm just using simple language right now. Where are the valleys? And then try to simplify those valleys. Do you have the same valley there on your sculpt? Probably not. So sculpt that valley. And then let's say not valleys, but let's say ridge tops. Okay. So what we're talking about is here's a valley. Here's a hill. And you need to know what that ridge top, what that and that are. You need to know what all of those things are. What's this ridge? Those are all three the really important things. And so let's do this very clear. I'm going to say ridge tops. I'm going to say valleys. And I'm going to say hills. Hills is a little tough, but since it's in white. So let's say ridge tops. Let's say valleys. And then let's say hills. You start to identify, do you have these things? The highest point? Do I have the highest point? Do I have the lowest point? Do I have that point where it really starts to transition between the two? And then once you got those kind of thought through, then you start to look, well, did I get that contouring right? Is it like that? Is it like that? Is it like that? And does it really dip in, or does it pull out, or all of that stuff. So we've got a valley right here. Do you have a valley? Sort of. We got a valley and a valley. We got a valley and a valley. And then we got to go in and start to analyze contouring. So I'm going to do contouring in white. But without knowing the anatomy, you can just look for these valleys and see, did I push that far enough in? In this case, you didn't push it far enough in. I don't see a side view, so I can't tell, but that'll tell you. That'll tell you. And this, so now I'm gonna clear this. So if you're watching this later, just screen capture it or screen capture it now. But these are the areas you're going to want to look at. I'm going to do them in red. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Did you get those correct and in the correct orientation? So you look for those in the front side 3/4. Did I get these correct? And nasolabial fold, nasolabial fold. The nasolabial fold goes behind the nostril, not in front, behind. So make sure it carves behind. Just start focusing on that, and that's it. Nothing else. Don't worry about anatomy. Just start thinking about topology. Hope that helps. Alex. Clean sculpt, facial landmarks. I think overall it's a good start. Need to fiddle with shapes. Give him some eyeballs. Legs feel a bit awkward. Need to experiment with gesture. Yeah, you're missing some volume here. So you're missing the fibula. So get the fibula in there. And then, yeah, fibula in here. Get some roundness. And we need a little bit. That's just a kind of hard line in. Get your 8th rib. And remember the portions we talked about earlier. There's 3 portions. The clavicular portion actually inserts a little higher up. So it, in essence, looks like, and I'll do this a little better drawing. It's like that. A little bit more like that anyways. Okay. And 10th rib. Try to treat this part of the gastrocnemius separate, because the gastrocnemius has these 2 parts, the wings and then the muscles. Don't forget the gluteus medius has a lot of bulk in there. Great face. Beautiful. Really awesome. Love the hands too. So getting a little confused between what's thumb and what's side of the, what's palm right there. So something to look at. Thanks, Alex. Okay, Prashant. Did you give me any notes? No. Okay, give me 1 sec, guys. I just need to check in on the team since we're now at hour 2. 1 second, I'll be right back. All right, guys, I got some good news and bad news, but we have to wrap up very, very soon. I've got the guys from Anatomy for Sculptors here. They're coming in for a visit, and we had to reschedule when I got sick. So they just are walking in. So let me finish critiquing Prashant, and then we're going to have to figure out what we do with the rest. But I think we've done a lot, and I hope learned a lot. So I'll also go through and make notes on things. We have a feature coming up, depending on when you watch this, called annotations. And that gives me the chance to comment directly on people's works in very specific locations. So I'll be able to do that as well. Prashant, what do we got? This is great. You have, it's like impressionist sculpting. So I love this. What only thing we're missing is depth. The valleys. You just don't have the same depth happening in the same place. And I can tell it from right here. So that's the view that's going to really tell you is that view right there. The eyeball occludes the corner of that eye. And then they're really close together. They're too close. You can see in him, they're farther apart. So pull those farther apart. Keep this. Do not change this. Move the eyes over, and you'll be fine. Do not change the size of the face. It is accurate. The eyes are just moved in too much. Please do not change the size of the face, though, because that'll then cascade and set off a whole bunch of other things. This is really nice, but remember that the high point is largely the masseter right there, which you can see it from a front view, but then boom, see how far forward that is? There's a whole bunch of the jaw left. It's pretty crazy. Keira Knightley image will show you that and give you a kind of a clear sense of things. So we've kind of got to dig in, find that high point, and then the nostrils are too wide. Are they too wide? It's not that the nostrils are too wide. It's that the tip of the nose is not built up enough. And he's a little deceiving. So you just need to work on the alar cartilage. And what I want you to do is find something called the tip defining point and place it on both your sculptures, both your sculpture and the reference. It's called tip defining point. Plastic surgeons use that term. And the facet. The facet is underneath. And you'll know the facet when you see it. It'll take a little while, but you'll just suddenly see it. You'll be like, oh, that's right. There's this tiny rectangle on the down plane of the nose that looks like a facet. That's kind of awesome. So there you go. Let me look at other people's work, but I am going to have to call it because the guys just came in and they're heading out this weekend. So I am stopping here at Prashant's. And that means that we've got Peter and Duan. Duan's got a ton. David, Robert, Jeff. Hey, Jeff, if you're here. And Steven. And what I'm going to try to do is get in and I'm going to just try to get in and critique these guys again because I'm really enjoying this. But we've got to terminate now. I'm going to go see how they're doing and see how Anatomy for Sculptors is growing. It's an amazing enterprise. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm going to give you guys a heads up. I am considering a 2-day workshop on face sculpting. I was not sure until this session whether or not I really thought it would be a good idea or not. But I think that there is so much good work here that it's really time for us to kind of dig in to a whole another level that's not really teacher and student so much as it's a community. And so hopefully we'll put that together for you shortly. Have a fantastic weekend. I will get to everybody either through the annotations or through another session here shortly that we just add up. So keep checking this. I'll post a note in discussions to keep you up to date what I'm doing. They do not email you, so you do have to come to the site to see that. I'll also post anything that I do extra on this. I'll post on my Facebook or actually on UArtsy's Facebook. So make sure you like UArtsy, Facebook.com/UArtsy. And that usually automatically goes to Twitter as well. And we'll go from there. Cheers, Danny, Steven, Alex, Avi, Charles. Thanks, guys, for everything and for sharing your work. And we will get to the rest of this.